This is a true story, narrated by the owner of the YouTube channel, Mr. Hao Ghost Story. The story is divided into 3 parts with titles. The Haunted Hospital in New York. We invite the audience to listen along. The Haunted Hospital in New York, Part 3. Please allow me to begin the best part. Please watch until the end. At 4:35 a.m., the sky was still dark, but it seemed that the night was slowly fading away, with the darkness gradually giving way to a clearer view. I had to run from the 3rd floor down to the 1st, then head to the duty room outside the main hall. The corridor was a mix of light and shadow, but I was too preoccupied to pay attention to my surroundings, so I kept my head down and moved swiftly. The sound of my footsteps echoed eerily in the silent corridor. I had already passed through the 2nd floor corridor, and now I just needed to descend to the 1st floor, take a few more steps, and I would reach the duty room. Just now, there was the sound of someone else's footsteps. I stopped in my tracks, turned around to look behind me. The spot where I stood was illuminated by a yellowish light, casting a circular glow. From here, looking down both sides of the corridor, I could only see patches of light alternating with darkness. Silence. I strained my ears. Clearly, someone else was still walking. If not on this floor, then they must be descending from the 3rd floor. Instinctively, I looked up at the staircase. A hand gripped the staircase railing, slender white fingers moving along it, accompanied by the sound of footsteps. I leaned sideways to get a clearer view of who was walking on the staircase. They stopped, no more footsteps. The hand gripping the railing remained still. Was it a nurse? Stepping out of the illuminated area, I approached the staircase, intending to ask who it was. There was a noise from the corridor to my left. I jerked my head to look, but there was nothing there except alternating patches of light and darkness. It must have been the wind brushing against the door or a branch outside, I reassured myself. Once again, I looked up at the staircase. The hand had disappeared. The staircase was empty, except for the light emanating from the bulb beneath where I stood. The staircase was almost pitch black. Where had the person just now gone? Wasn't that person supposed to be descending to the 2nd floor? What was going on? I stared for a moment longer, then convinced there was no one on the staircase, I bowed my head and continued down. I lowered my head, and what met my eyes beneath the staircase on the 1st floor was someone looking up directly at me. The face was completely unfamiliar. I could only see half of their visage, a soulless black eye, pallid skin, and a twisted grin stretching towards the ear. Their gaze pierced into my brain, making my head feel like it was about to explode. This was what I had been suspicious of, my intuition telling me that it was indeed watching me. Cold, the wind pierces through me, chilling my brain to numbness, then as if an electric shock ran down my spine, causing my hands and feet to involuntarily tremble. Oh, my mother down there. Was it a person or a ghost? What day is it today that so many strange things are happening? My body seemed to be rooted in place. Now it was up to my brain to take charge. My rationality had died silent. Suddenly, that face withdrew behind the staircase. I jerked. Where did it go, upstairs or towards the main hall? If I still saw it, I would only be scared. But now that it disappeared, I would not only be scared, but also uneasy. What if it's a ghost? Is it crawling up here to kill me quickly? The figure remained motionless, further fueling my confusion. Seconds later, seeing no one approaching, I was surrounded by silence. Truly, no one was there. Perhaps I just saw it wrong. It's so dark down there, how could I see clearly? Maybe it was just the shadow of something cast upon the staircase. After calming down somewhat, I suddenly burst into laughter. When left alone with my thoughts, I concocted all sorts of ghostly fantasies, my mind playing tricks on me. Thinking so, but as I continued down the staircase, I still slowed down. At every step, I peered intently below to see if there was anything unusual. I reached the final step in anxiety, but in reality, nothing happened at all. After stepping out into the hallway, the lobby was spacious, with plenty of lights brightening up the surroundings. I immediately made my way towards the duty room on the left. Inside, there were 2 nurses, both of whom seemed sleepy. One of them had her head resting on the table as I looked in. I spoke up, asking them to check on the person lying in room 301. The nurse who was dozing off at that moment woke up, chuckled a bit, then arranged her belongings into a tray before accompanying me to the room. I noticed that neither of these two nurses was the one I encountered earlier. One of them was the one who examined Henry when I first arrived, identified by her name tag as Rishima. The nurse accompanying me to the room was Fidelia. Fidelia was a bit short but had a full figure, and she even had dimples when she smiled. As we climbed the stairs, I asked, "Is your name Fidelia? Today only 2 nurses are on duty at the hospital, right?" "Yes, during the week, there are 3 of us on duty, but on weekends it's usually just 2 of us." "Only 2 nurses, huh? So which department is Nurse Giselle in?" "Who's Giselle?" "Giselle, the one about this tall. She passed by the 3rd floor corridor last night." I provided Fidelia with a brief description of the nurse I had encountered. "There's no one like that. Today there's a male doctor on duty in the emergency and treatment department. Among the nurses working with me, none of them are named Giselle. There's no one with that name here, really." I was taken aback as we had now reached the 3rd floor. The room at the end of the hallway was still brightly lit. Upon entering Henry's room, as soon as he saw me and the nurse approaching, he seemed about to sit up, but the nurse advised him to lie still as she could still perform the necessary checks that way. The nurse was very efficient. As soon as she sat down, she strapped the blood pressure cuff onto Henry's arm, checked his blood pressure, listened to his heartbeat, inspected his stitches, and asked a few questions about his psychological well-being. Then she handed him some pills, explaining that they were for swelling and antibiotics after surgery. I stood by with a cup of water, ready to assist. Just as she took the cup, the nurse suddenly paused. "Where did you get this cup from?" "The nurse named Giselle brought this cup to me." "No, our hospital hasn't used these iron cups for a long time. They rust easily, so we switched to stainless steel cups. It's against hospital policy to use these cups anymore." I didn't know. I really had a nurse named Giselle bring this cup to my room. "We have many nurses here, but none of them are named Giselle." "You must be mistaken," Fidelia said as she took out a stainless steel cup from her tray to pour water, then gave Henry his medication for him to drink. I met Nurse Giselle in the hallway. She seemed to be coming from the last room on the 3rd floor. Fidelia stopped her actions, then looked up at me with a mix of surprise and confusion. "You mean the last room on this 3rd floor?" "Yes. She even had a tray of medication like yours. It seems she had just finished checking that room." "It's impossible. That room is empty." "But the lights were on." This time, Fidelia genuinely stared at me, as if my words were completely nonsensical. "Are you sure it was the last room?" "Why do you ask? I saw it was lit up. If you don't believe me, come with me and see." Fidelia immediately stood up. I went to open the door and we both stepped out of the room. Standing in the hallway, I pointed towards the end of the hallway and said, "There, the last room." The words I was about to say choked in my throat. The other rooms were all dark. The room at the end of the hallway was just as dark. "Which room did you say?" "Is it that you don't know? That room was the emergency room 3 years ago, but because the hospital built a separate emergency department, this area is now only used for post-emergency treatment. That room has been converted into a storage room with medical supplies inside. It's only open during the day, not at night. But I really saw someone coming from there, and that person even gave me that cup." "Maybe you're too tired, so you're mistaken. The cup might have been placed on the table beforehand. You're trying to scare me, aren't you? I've been working in this hospital for several years. These childish tricks won't work on me." After saying that, Fidelia laughed and turned back into the room to continue checking on Henry. Now I was left alone in the hallway, not disheartened. My eyes still couldn't leave that room. It turned out it was still immersed in darkness, just like the other rooms. Why did I suddenly feel that room was so sinister? A whisper echoed in my head. "It's a ghost showing itself to you." Zap! Suddenly, light flashed from within the room at the end of the hallway. I felt the chill run down my spine. In the next moment, I saw someone standing in front of the door of that room facing me. Then it was all dark and blurry again. The sky was gradually brightening up, and the space was less silent, with a few birds chirping and brooms sweeping around. I still stood motionless, eyes fixed forward. I didn't want to see anything like that again, but I couldn't look away either. My head was buzzing. This was the result of a sleepless night, the most stressful night of my life. Just as I was in a trance, Fidelia stepped out from the room, seeing me standing like a statue outside the door. She lightly tapped my hand, jolting me awake. I turned to look at her, my expression seemingly very tense, which made Fidelia curious as she asked, "What do you see? Your face looks strange." Involuntarily, I glanced towards the room at the end of the hallway, where darkness filled my eyes. I shook my head, feeling truly exhausted. Fidelia followed my gaze, not seeing me respond. She sighed and said, "You must be very sleepy, huh? Come inside the room with my friend. My friend is fine now. You can lie down on any bed and sleep for a while." Saying that, she patted my shoulder and opened the door, leading me into the room. The door closed, and I sank into the chair, my head spinning, and my vision blurred. Henry, seeing me enter, glanced over, but I didn't bother with him anymore. Now all I wanted was to go home and sleep, to forget all of this. "Is something wrong with you?" Henry struggled to sit up from the bed, probably because my face looked so unpleasant. "No. If you're sleepy, go to sleep. I'm fine now, or just go home. I'll ask to be discharged in the afternoon." I didn't reply. After a moment, I asked, "Did you see the person crash into your car?" "Not very clearly. I think it was a woman because of the long hair covering her face. It happened so suddenly, and the motorcycle headlight was blinding. I only remember she was about 5 feet tall, with a pale face, eyes as big as frogs." "Are you sure she was about that height?" "Yeah, because I had the headlights on. Standing 10 meters away, with a height of 5 feet, you could see her face." "So it was true, the nurse last night was about 5 feet tall too." I suddenly bowed my head, my hands hanging limply on the chair. So meeting a ghost is like that. So the end of this story is over. Thank you for watching all 3 parts. Please subscribe to the channel to watch the next ghost stories I tell. Thank you so much.